There was a time when life felt heavy in a quiet way. Not the kind of heavy that makes you cry, but the kind that makes you tired before the day even begins. I woke up each morning already exhausted, not from work, but from existing. My days followed the same rhythm. Wake up, get ready, show up, go home, repeat. People saw me, but they didn't notice me. I was present, yet invisible. From the outside, nothing looked wrong. I fulfilled my responsibilities and avoided trouble. But inside, everything felt muted. I stopped expecting anyone to ask how I was doing. Not because people were unkind, but because I had learned not to be seen. When fatigue stays with you for too long, you stop explaining it. You simply carry it alone. During that period, English felt very far away, not difficult, just irrelevant. English belonged to people with energy, dreams, and ambition. I was only trying to get through the day. Why would I add another burden? Words without emotion didn't stay. They passed through me and disappeared. At night, I felt an emptiness that had no name. I wasn't sad. I was drained. I slept, but woke up tired. I rested, but nothing returned. I began to wonder if this was adulthood life that wasn't painful, just dull. I felt alone, even when surrounded by people, separated by an invisible wall. English symbolized distance from opportunity, expression, and another world. I avoided it without realizing it. I didn't know then that exhaustion is often a sign not of weakness, but of misalignment. I didn't have those words yet. I only had the feeling, and that feeling was quietly waiting. That waiting didn't feel hopeful. It wasn't the kind of waiting that looks towards something better. It was passive, almost invisible, like standing still while time moved around me. Days blended together without landmarks. Nothing marked the passage except growing fatigue. I wasn't unhappy enough to change, but I wasn't comfortable enough to stay. I existed somewhere in between, and that space was quietly exhausting. I became skilled at appearing fine. I learned how to smile at the right moments, how to give short answers that ended conversations before they became personal. People described me as calm, reliable, easy to work with. They didn't see how much effort it took just to remain steady. They didn't see how often I felt disconnected from my own life. I stopped imagining the future. Not because I didn't want one, but because imagining required energy I no longer had. Thinking ahead felt heavy, like lifting something without knowing where to place it. So I stayed close to the present, too close. I focused on getting through the day, then the next, telling myself that this was enough. English remained part of that distant future I wasn't ready to face. It represented movement, possibility, a wider world. And movement felt risky when I didn't know what I was moving toward. So I stayed where I was, convincing myself that stability mattered more than meaning. There were moments when distractions faded and I sensed that something essential was missing. I couldn't name it, and because I couldn't name it, I ignored it. I returned to routine, believing that consistency would eventually turn into fulfillment. I didn't realize then that this quiet discomfort wasn't something to escape. It was something to listen to. It was pointing toward a part of me that had been ignored for too long, patiently waiting for a moment small, ordinary, and unexpected to remind me what it felt like to be alive again. That moment did not arrive with intention. I wasn't looking for it. I was simply moving through another ordinary, heavy day. I stopped at a small, unremarkable place, thinking about nothing when someone spoke to me. It wasn't urgent or loud, just a simple greeting. Our eyes met. They smiled. Not a smile that asks, but one that gives. It lasted only a second, yet it stayed with me. Someone had seen me, not my role, not my responsibilities, just me. That feeling was unfamiliar. Over time, we exchanged small words, nothing personal, nothing deep. But those moments felt gentle. I stood straighter. I breathed easier. I spoke more clearly, not from confidence, but from safety. I began to notice how rare simple kindness had become, not because people were cruel, but because everyone was busy. That smile felt like a pause, an interruption in my numb routine. It didn't solve my problems, but it shifted the weight slightly enough to breathe. Kindness didn't demand energy. It gave it, and slowly, something inside me began to wake up. That waking was not sudden. It didn't arrive as motivation or excitement. It was quieter than that, a subtle shift in awareness. I didn't feel happy, but I felt less numb. And that difference mattered more than I expected. I started paying attention to small details I had ignored before. The tone of someone's voice. The way people avoided eye contact when they were tired. The brief softness that appeared when someone felt acknowledged. I realize how often we move through each other's lives without truly arriving, without pausing long enough to recognize the human in front of us. That smile had been a pause, a reminder that presence does not require conversation. It only requires attention, and the tension, I discovered, has weight. It can lighten a day without changing its circumstances. As days passed, those small exchanges became something I noticed instead of something I dismissed. A nod from a stranger. A short thank you that lingered a little longer than usual. A moment of eye contact that felt sincere. None of these moments fixed my life, but they softened it. They gave shape to days that had felt flat and interchangeable. I also noticed how my body responded. My shoulders were no longer constantly tense. My breathing slowed. I wasn't rushing as much, even when I had nowhere special to go. It was as if my nervous system had been waiting for permission to rest. Permission. It finally received through something as simple as kindness that surprised me. I had always believed that change required effort, decisions, and strength. But this change asked for none of those. It arrived quietly, without instruction. It didn't push me forward. It invited me back to the moment, to myself. I began to realize how starved I had been for acknowledgement, not praise, not validation, just recognition. To be seen without explanation. To exist without having to justify my presence or productivity. That smile had offered exactly that, and my system responded immediately, as if it had been waiting for years. Slowly, I found myself responding in return. Not deliberately, naturally. I noticed my own face softening, my own smile appearing without effort. I wasn't trying to be kind. I was simply less guarded, and that was when I understood something important. Kindness is not an action you perform when you have energy. It is something that gives energy when you have none. It doesn't require confidence or strength. It only requires openness. And openness, once it appears, begins to change how you move through the world. That moment didn't fix me. It didn't solve my problems, but it reminded me that I was still capable of feeling, still capable of responding, still capable of connection. And that reminder was enough to begin something new quietly, gently, one small moment at a time. After that, nothing changed dramatically. My routine remained the same, but my awareness shifted. I began to notice people not out of curiosity, but humanity. I responded instead of withdrawing. A nod, a smile, a simple thank you softened my days. And in those moments, English appeared. Not deliberately, not formally. It showed up when connection required it. A simple sentence, a small clarification. I spoke without fear, without judgment. English no longer felt heavy. It allowed me to stay in the conversation. I realized language is not confidence. It is permission. Permission to participate. When presence came first, fear became secondary. I stopped chasing fluency and focused on clarity. I allowed pauses and mistakes. Nothing bad happened. Conversations continued. I understood then that I had never been quiet because I lacked confidence. I had been quiet because I didn't feel safe. And safety grows from attention, kindness, and presence. That understanding changed the way I treated myself. I stopped forcing my voice to appear stronger than it felt. I stopped measuring my worth by how smoothly I spoke or how quickly I responded. Instead, I paid attention to whether I was present, whether I was actually there in the moment, listening, receiving, and responding honestly. Safety, I learned, is not created by perfection. It is created by consistency, by small moments that repeat without harm. Each time I spoke and nothing bad happened, something inside me relaxed. Each time I paused and was not interrupted, I trusted the space a little more. My voice didn't grow louder, but it grew steadier. English continued to follow that steadiness. It no longer felt like something separate from me. It became part of how I stayed connected. When I didn't know a word, I described it. When I made a mistake, I continued. I stopped apologizing for existing in the conversation. That alone felt like progress. I also noticed how differently people responded when I was present. They listened more closely. They slowed down. They filled the pauses instead of avoiding them. Communication became shared, not something I carried alone. That shared responsibility eased the pressure I had always placed on myself. Slowly, I began to trust silence, too. Not as a hiding place, but as a space to think, to breathe, to choose words that mattered. Silence no longer meant absence. It meant attention. And when I spoke after silence, my words felt grounded. I realized that safety does not arrive all at once. It grows through repetition, through moments where you are seen and not judged, heard and not rushed. Kindness had opened the door, but presence was what kept me inside, and from that place of safety, my voice returned, not dramatically, not all at once, but naturally, not to impress, not to prove, but to connect. It took me a long time to understand what that small kindness had truly given me. It reminded me that I was still human, that I could still feel and respond to the world. Change didn't come loudly or dramatically. It came quietly, through attention. English was no longer a symbol of pressure or success. It became another way to say, I see you. I'm here. I stopped asking if I was good enough and started asking if I was present enough. When presence comes first, language follows honestly, imperfectly. Kindness opened me again. I didn't become a different person. I became more myself, slower, quieter, more attentive. I learned that loneliness often means being unseen, and being seen requires only one moment of genuine attention. If you are listening and feel tired or invisible, know this: you are not broken. Reconnection doesn't begin with big decisions, but with small moments, a pause, a breath, a kind interaction. Small kindness is never small. It has the power to bring you back to yourself, quietly and gently, one moment at a time. What stayed with me most was not the memory of that kindness, but the change it created in how I moved through my life afterward. I began to treat moments differently, not as things to rush through, but as places to arrive. I learned to slow down enough to notice when something felt gentle, when a conversation felt real, when a pause felt safe. I stopped waiting for my life to feel meaningful before I allowed myself to engage with it. Engagement came first. Meaning followed. That shift changed how I related to both language and life. I no longer needed certainty to speak or confidence to connect. I needed only honesty. There are still days when the old tiredness returns. Days when the world feels heavy again. But now I know what to look for. I look for moments that soften me rather than demand from me. Moments that ask for attention, not performance. And when I find them, I stay. Because staying, I've learned, is sometimes the most powerful act of all.